Tabletop RPGs are often seen as a social experience, a group of friends gathered around a table, rolling dice, telling stories together. But sometimes that's easier said than done. You might have a hard time finding a group to play with, or you might want to engage in the tabletop RPG hobby on your own. What if I told you that tabletop RPGs don't have to be social at all? What if you could explore deep narratives, make impactful choices, and experience roleplay entirely on your own? When I decided to make this video, I had no personal experience with solo-friendly RPGs. I owned a few that could be played solo, but I never did. Neither had I bothered to learn much about the solo game hobby at all. In fact, making this video became a motivation for me to explore an entirely new space. Today, we're diving into the world of solo RPGs, how they work, where they came from, and why they've become such a growing trend. We'll explore the history, the mechanics, some standout games, and what the future might hold. I'm not an expert at this topic, and I won't pretend to be. This will cover my exploration and impression, and what I learned along the way. When we talk about solo RPGs, it's easy to think of them as a recent innovation, something born out of convenience or even the pandemic. But in truth, solo RPGs go back much further than many might expect. Long before Dungeons & Dragons, solo-friendly board games and war games were being played, and there was already an audience for solo experiences. When D&D later released in 1973, there was an interest in adapting the dungeon crawls for solo play. In 1975, the first signs of a solo D&D experience appeared in the Strategic Review, a publication that would later become Dragon Magazine. There, Gary Gygax, creator of D&D, introduced mechanics that gave players the ability to explore dungeons without the need for a dungeon master. The tools were later expanded and implemented in the first edition Dungeon Master's Guide. Around the same time, Tunnels and Trolls, written by Ken St. Andre and published by Flying Buffalo, emerged as a simpler, more approachable alternative to D&D. While not originally built for solo play, it was the first RPG to publish dedicated solo modules, starting with Buffalo Castle in 1976. Buffalo Castle was essentially a choose-your-own-adventure dungeon crawl, featuring about 30 pages of paragraphs containing choices and information to help navigate the dungeon. It starts with the following paragraph. You are facing a large gloomy castle with 3 large wooden doors. If you choose to go in the left door, turn to 4A. If you wish to go in the center door, go to 8A. If you wish to go into the right door, turn to 12A. If I were to choose the left door, I'd look up the paragraph marked 4A and read, you walk down a short corridor and enter the small room 10 by 10 feet. There is a troll sitting on a treasure chest. He is looking at you in a bored fashion. If you wish to fight him, go to 7A. If you wish to try to talk to him, go to 14A. If you wish to try to walk by him, go to 18A. This is room number 4. Let's say that I want to fight him and go to 7A. That paragraph reads, he has a monster rating of 40, 5 dice. If you kill him, go to 17A. This is where the Tunnels and Trolls game mechanics come in. Ken St. Andre wrote in 1979 that his system was meant to be more accessible and affordable than D&D.
So I sat down to read this and see what it was really all about. I read it for about an hour. I didn't read the whole thing. I skipped over great sections of it that didn't seem relevant or make any sense to me. But when I was done, I said, what a wonderful idea. What a terrible way to do it. I will go and make a game that I can play. Where am I going to get D8s and D12s and D20s and stuff? It's Phoenix, they didn't exist. But D6s were available. We called them regular dice.
He highlighted the solo modules as a way for players to experience role-playing without needing a group, something that resonated with many players. While D&D became the dominant RPG in the US, it was actually Tunnels and Trolls that first gained international traction. Its use of standard 6-sided dice made translation and distribution far easier than D&D's more complex polyhedral dependent rules. In parallel to all this, a different form of solo storytelling was evolving in the world of books. In 1969, even before Dungeons & Dragons, Edward Packard began developing a story format where readers could choose what happened next, an idea inspired by the bedtime stories he told his children.
When I was making up stories for the kids, I thought, I'm doing an adventure story like that. So I thought, what do kids think? Kids like sugar. How about Sugar Cane Island? And so I got my kid. I thought of a kid being shipwrecked, and I said, started telling a story, and then I couldn't think of what to happen next in the story. So I asked the kids, well, what would you do now? You know, in this situation, you're washed up on the beach, you're going to climb up the rocky hill or walk along the beach. You got to find somebody to help you get some food and stuff. And so I got different answers, and pretty soon I had branching plots.
Although The Adventure of You on Sugarcane Island wasn't published until 1976, it's now considered one of the earliest examples of the gamebook genre. These interactive books offered players narrative choice and consequence, but without direct game mechanics. In the early 1980s, interactive fiction and game mechanics merged with Fighting Fantasy by Steve Jackson and Ian Livingstone, the founders of Games Workshop, and with Lone Wolf by Joe Dever. These were hybrid experiences where players combined Adobe package style of interactive fiction with game mechanics and character progression. As this was also the time when personal computers became more commercially available, digital games like Colossal Cave Adventure, later Zork, brought text-based interactive fiction to a wider audience. The development of Gary Gygax's solo D&D rules, the Tunnels and Trolls modules like Buffalo Castle, and interactive fiction like the gamebooks all evolved seemingly in parallel. Some argue that gamebooks were the first true solo RPGs, others consider them more in the realm of interactive fiction than actual role-playing games. Either way, while it's hard to name a singular origin point for the creation of solo RPGs, all these formats together helped shape what solo RPGs would become. The interest in solo RPGs and other solo adventures waned in the 1990s, very likely due to video games. However, with the rise of the internet, some things changed. Online communities began rediscovering old solo modules and gamebooks. Digital PDFs were shared, and discussions around solo-friendly mechanics started to re-emerge in forums, blogs, and fan sites. In the 2000s and 2010s, the solo RPG scene began its renaissance. New games were created specifically for solo play, some focusing on journaling, others on procedural worldbuilding, and some were hybrids that blurred the line between game and narrative tool. It was still a niche space, largely separated from the general tabletop RPG community. However, even today, solo RPGs stand as a unique and thriving genre. This might be in part due to the pandemic. When the world locked down in early 2020, tabletop gaming, like so many hobbies, hit a wall. Game nights were cancelled, groups disbanded, and for many the social side of role-playing simply vanished overnight. As players searched for ways to stay connected to the tabletop RPG hobby without access to in-person groups, VTTs and solo RPGs emerged as lifelines. While VTTs were already well known at the dawn of the pandemic, solo RPGs were new experiences for many, and they had an unprecedented boom in popularity during the early months of the COVID-19 pandemic. With limited social interaction and an increased need for escapism, many players turned inward. Journaling games like the wretched 1000-year-old vampire and Alone Among the Stars offered space for self-reflection, emotional processing, and creative release. These weren't just games anymore. They became tools for managing anxiety and expressing uncertainty. I didn't personally know of these games until I started researching this video, but I kinda wish I had explored games like these during the pandemic. However, I've taken a deeper look at some of them now, and I'm going to talk more about them and other solo games later in the video. Many players who engaged in these types of games during the pandemic might have found a ritual of writing, imagining and rolling dice alone to provide a strange sense of agency or comfort at a time when the world felt unpredictable. Solo games also gained traction for their ease of use. With fewer components and no need for scheduling, they could act as natural entry points for people new to the RPG hobby. Journaling games and lightweight systems often required nothing more than a notebook, a deck of cards, or a couple of six-sided dice. While some larger publishers, like Free League, made solo games for bigger games, independent creators made smaller and more digestible solo experiences and sold or shared them on sites like itch.io, which has long been a hub for indie games. As creators saw growing interest in solo RPGs, more games were designed from the ground up for solo play. Mechanics evolved. Game designers experimented with tarot cards, Jenga towers, story dice, audio recordings, and even Google Forms. By the end of the pandemic, solo RPGs had transformed from fringe curiosity into a thriving subgenre. I've already mentioned the early iterations of solo games and solo experiences through gamebooks and solo dungeons. However, there have been several decades of innovation since. One of the most exciting things about modern solo RPGs is just how varied they are in how they work. Different games cater to different moods, creative needs, and player styles. However, at their core, most solo RPGs fall into a few broad mechanical categories. Journaling RPGs focus on introspection and storytelling through writing. Players often respond to prompts, record their characters' thoughts, and document unfolding events in the form of diary entries, letters, or logbooks. These games are often light on traditional mechanics and heavy on emotional or thematic exploration. Some use randomizers like dice or card draws to generate prompts, while others follow more structured flow. Some examples of journaling games are Alone Among the Stars, Anamnesis, Quill, and 1000-Year-Old Vampire. Oracle-based games and GM emulators act in place of a game master by using randomized tables and oracle mechanics, systems that answer yes-no questions or guide narrative developments. A player might ask, "Does the merchant betray me?" roll some dice, consult a table, and receive an answer like "yes but" or "no" when something worse happens. These tools are particularly useful when adapting traditional RPG systems for solo play. Some examples include Ironsworn, Mythic Game Master Emulator, Scarlet Heroes, and The Adventure Crafter. In procedural exploration and dungeon crawling games, the structure comes from the environment. Unless they have other hybrid mechanics, procedural exploration and dungeon crawling games don't normally have role-playing as part of the game loop. Instead, players explore maps, draw cards, or roll dice to generate rooms, corridors, encounters, or entire story paths. These games often include light combat, random encounters, and resource tracking, blending elements of board gaming with some storytelling. Some examples of published procedural solo games are Ex Novo, 4 Against Darkness, and 2D6 Dungeon. Some solo RPGs defy categorization entirely. They blend journaling with resource management, card drawing with dice rolling, or even include tactile elements like Jenga towers or drawing maps. Others reimagine solo play as something experiential or poetic. Some examples are Apothecaria, Be Like a Crow, Gentleman Bandit, The Sealed Library, or The Wretched. Now that we have looked at how solo RPGs work, let's explore a few notable games that highlight the diversity of the genre. I'm going to talk about the games I looked deeper into and show some footage of me going hands-on with each one. I thought that if I'm going to make a video about something, I should at least familiarize myself with it. So I decided to play a bunch of solo games, I decided to record myself doing so, and probably regret it after I, completely fail. If you're interested in more of this footage, you'll find it as a Tier 2 member on Patreon or as a YouTube member. Apart from access to these videos, you will also get access to all my game design projects. This includes the cyberpunk power fantasy game Machineborn, which after 8 years of work is now a complete game at over 500 pages. I'm going to talk more about the making of that game in my next video. I also have worked on my own procedural solo game, but I'm not ready to go into detail on that yet. Anyway, the first solo RPG I played was the journaling game Alone Among the Stars by Takuma Okada. The concept is that you're alone in space, exploring strange planets and recording your experiences. It follows a very simplistic structure and could be seen more as a creative writing exercise than a game. You draw cards and roll a die to determine prompts, which you then use to describe how you explore alien landscapes. You are a solitary adventurer, hopping from planet to planet exploring. Each world has unique features for you to discover and record. They are represented by cards from a standard deck, placed face down. To find a new planet, roll a 6-sided die and place cards face down equal to the number rolled. To flip over a card to discover something, roll a 6-sided die. On a 1 to 2, it is arduous to get to. On a 3 to 4, you come upon it suddenly. On a 5 to 6, you spot it as you are resting. The suit and rank determine the discovery. In your ship's log, a small journal if you have one, record a short description and your reaction in a few sentences. And roll for the next card. Each time you complete a planet, give it a number or a name, and find a new planet. Let's see, to find a new planet, roll a 6-sided die. I have a die here. Let's see, 5. And then I'm going to place cards face down equal to the number rolled. So I rolled a 5, so that would be 5 cards. I'm placing them here where you're seeing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now I'm going to roll a die again. 5. So spot it as you are resting. And then I'm going to draw a card. And we have I'm not sure if you can see it here actually. This might be easier. 5 of clubs. So clubs are plants. And 5 in a treetop. Interesting. Planet 1. After having soared through the empty void for several days, my sensors picked up a nearby planet. I didn't know what to expect. It certainly wasn't Earth. The continents were different, but it had oceans, mountains, forests, and life. My sensors indicated that the air was breathable. I initiated landing procedure to take a closer look. When I stepped outside of the ship, I still wore my spacesuit. I didn't know what kinds of dangers awaited me here, and I didn't want to contaminate myself or my ship with some alien pathogen or worse. I landed at the coast, next to a forest. It looked much like the forest back on Earth, and the climate seemed temperate. I decided not to walk too far from my spaceship to avoid getting lost or running into something dangerous. All of my sensor readings told me that everything was safe. This is not a solo RPG for those looking for a gaming experience. It is aimed at those who enjoy creative writing. The prompts are deliberately vague, only there to offer inspiration and to add structure to your own creative exercise. Because they are vague, some can feel repetitive, handing responsibility over to you to add a unique flair. I found it strangely relaxing and poetic, and it works well for me who likes to write. The second game I played was The Wretched by Chris Bissett. This is very similar in structure to Alone Among the Stars, using a 6-sided die and a deck of cards to generate prompts. However, this game is more involved than Alone Among the Stars, and feels more like a game because of it. It does this by introducing a Jenga tower to add tension and risk of failure. You are the last survivor on a ship that's been attacked by a hostile alien creature, and the prompts are there to generate experiences and activities related to the ship's system, structure and crew, or the creature that's hunting you. Some prompts ask you to pull from the Jenga tower, and when it inevitably falls, the ship is destroyed. After each day of activities, you're recording your experiences as a log, which is where the journaling comes in. You are the last surviving crew member of the intergalactic salvage ship, the Wretched. Adrift between stars after an engine failure, your ship was attacked by a hostile alien lifeform. The crew are dead. You are alone. You thought you had won. You launched the creature out on airlock, and that should have meant safety. It didn't. The creature survived, somehow immune to the cold, empty black of space. Now it skitters and crawls across the hull of your ship. It seeks a way in. It wants you. Now it is you versus inevitability. Can you keep your life support systems going long enough to repair your distress beacon? With the beacon activated, can you keep the creature at bay long enough to be rescued, assuming somebody hears your cry? Probably not, but you have to try. The second card is a Queen of Diamonds. Queen of Diamonds. Diamonds represent your ship's physical structures. When you draw a diamond, you're physically engaging with the ship, patching up the hull, sealing doors behind you, or accessing new areas. Structures. Queen. You spend a day taking the engine apart completely and putting back together in an attempt to fix it. Pull from the tower. Do not replace this block at the top of the tower. Remove it from the game instead. Interesting. So I guess we're going to do that right now then. Out of the game. Day 3. Salvage ship to Wretched. Flight engineer Echo RN reporting. I got a sudden wake-up call today from the comm system blinking to life and picking up the garbled chatter from a nearby human vessel. I heard they mention some kind of salvage operation, but I couldn't make out the details. I practically ran through the corridors to get to the comm station so that I could respond to it, but the signal fell silent once I got there. Damn. But I was up on my feet now, and this was proof that there were actual people out there somewhere. I wasn't alone in the universe, even if it felt like it. So I spent the better part of the day taking the engine apart and trying to put it back together. I thought that if I could get it up and running again, I might be able to catch up to that signal and possibly receive help from them. I don't care if they want to salvage the ship, they can have it for all I care. I found the addition of the Jenga tower very effective, since it creates a tension that you wouldn't feel by a simple writing exercise. This is also why it feels more like a game than Alone Among the Stars did. However, the prompts are much more specified in the Wretched, which means that multiple playthroughs will generate a similar outcome. That makes Alone Among the Stars more diverse in the kinds of stories that it generates, even if the game itself is much more simplistic. I didn't actually play any Oracle games in depth, but I took a deeper look at the solo mode for Free League's The Walking Dead RPG. The Oracle systems are strong prompt generators that could be used for creative writing as well, but the fact that they're based on traditional tabletop RPGs make them feel more like role-playing games by default. Instead of journaling, you're actively playing the game with yourself using simplified systems and random tables to affect the outcome. You don't actually have to sit around talking to yourself. It all takes place in your mind as you roll dice and generate results. You need to write things up to keep track of things, but you don't have to structure it in the same way a journaling game would. What you'll find in this chapter are a set of guidelines, procedures, tables and advice to help you play the Walking Dead universe role-playing game without a GM. These rules are written assuming you will be playing alone, but they can also be used with one or more friends where the role of GM is ignored. They can even be used by a GM in a traditional game with a focus on improvisation and zero prep play. Solo play introduces a challenge sheet in addition to the character and haven sheets. This has been designed to help the solo player keep track of important plot points such as NPCs, factions, issues, rumors, challenges and the endgame. There are 3 main tools you will be using during solo play: the Luck Oracle, the Theme Oracle and the Messing Up Oracle. Just as in other solo role-playing games, these oracles are used to randomly determine answers to questions or to provide further information on a topic. The Luck Oracle. Questions will arise in your game that may be hard to answer, questions typically asked of a GM. This is where the Luck Oracle comes into play. Phrase it as a yes or no question. If there is an obvious answer or if your gut is telling you something, go with that instead of rolling, otherwise determine the odds. If you're not sure of the odds or they are 50-50, simply roll 1 die. Then we have the Theme Oracle. Sometimes you may need to make sense of a situation. Perhaps you need more detail about the location, a person or some other idea. Whenever you are stuck in this way, roll a D666 on the oracle below. I did notice that I have some unopened Walking Dead dice. So let's just play with them a bit. I want to figure out if everyone is attending the morning meeting. So I'm rolling one of these lovely Walking Dead D6s and I get a 5. That means yes. And as I determined before, that means more than half of the community members are attending the morning meeting. Then I might want to imagine what the general, or yes, I might just want to get some inspiration about how to approach the scene, I suppose, with the meeting. So I'm rolling a D666. I cannot roll dice. I roll a 313. 13 is oppression. So most of the people in the community are attending the morning meeting, and there is an argument related to oppression. Perhaps the members are unhappy with the current leadership, and they are feeling oppressed, they are feeling pushed, and they want some kind of change. While I don't have much experience with other Oracle systems, I found The Walking Dead to be well suited for solo play. The base game is already heavily relying on random tables to generate outcomes, so the solo mode felt like a seamless transition. The final game I had a chance to play before making this video was the city building game Ex Novo by Sharkbomb Studios. This game uses paper, pencil, 6-sided dice, tokens and random tables to help generate a map and a growing settlement. You go through different stages of development from the city's founding and help generate events, factions and landmarks. Basics. You and up to 3 friends take on the role of the guardian spirits of a freshly founded settlement. Its founding just brought you into existence. Your purpose? To witness its growth, shepherd its development and remember its stories. During play you will make sense of the events happening as you draw and plan on a collaborative map of the settlement and its changing shape. In the end you will have created an interesting fictional place with a sense of history. Play begins with a brief discussion phase. Here each player shares their assumptions and expectations. In this phase you will also determine the final size and age of the city. We begin with a founding phase. Here the basics of the settlement, such as its purpose or the surrounding terrain, are determined. By following a predefined sequence of turns you will end up with an interesting starting situation. After this you enter the development phase. This is where the exciting history of your city is played out and its shape evolves. The number of times this phase is repeated depends on the age of your settlement. During each phase you will add an interesting event that needs to be interpreted by the active player. Here the settlement will grow, transform or even shrink. The final phase is the topping out phase. A few quick turns are taken to wrap up the development and tie off all loose ends. A small hamlet where everyone knows each other and most people are focused on the necessities. Split the map with 5 lines, set aside 3 citizen tokens. Let's make 1 line, 2 lines, 3 lines, 4 lines, 5 lines. The different game elements that can be added, changed or moved are regions, abstract units of space, terrain, areas of interesting geography, landmarks, objects or places of interest that may be related to factions or resources. Resources, things of value to the city. Districts, areas where people live. Citizen tokens represents the city's residents. Factions, organized groups with agendas. Power tokens, an abstract measure of faction power and influence. Factions are written down on note cards as they appear, but every other type of element is always drawn directly on the map. Here, in the middle of this island, is a lake. And this is a freshwater lake. And in the middle of this freshwater lake is an island. And we don't know anything about this island yet, but we might figure something out. This game is less of a role-playing game and more of a role-playing tool in my opinion. It has gameplay elements through its structure, but it's not something I would play again just for the sake of entertainment. I would, however, use it as a tool to generate maps and settlements. It could be a useful tool as part of a session 0 to establish a setting for a role-playing campaign. Actually, for that purpose it is very effective. While the foundations of solo RPGs stretch back to the 1970s and the pandemic brought renewed spotlight to the hobby, today's solo RPG landscape feels distinct from its earlier roots. What we are seeing now, especially in the indie space, is an exploration of creativity, accessibility and diversity in how these games are made, played and shared. One of the most notable trends is the rise of journaling games, like the ones I've shown in this video. These games emphasize personal storytelling, introspection and creative writing. While they may appeal to a more niche audience compared to gameplay-focused systems, they have carved out a devoted and loyal community, one that actively supports small creators and encourages new ideas. The indie market in general has embraced solo RPGs for their simplicity and low barrier to entry. Many games are either free or pay what you want, and they often only rely on basic tools that most people have access to, like a normal deck of cards or 6-sided dice. They don't require vast time investments to learn, can often just be picked up and played, and are easily found and shared on platforms like itch.io and DriveThruRPG. There also seems to be a renewed interest in traditional minimalistic printing like booklets and signs, often through crowdfunding platforms like Kickstarter. But there's also a surge in digital tools like GM emulators, web interfaces, and VTTs. If done right, these can offer new accessibility options, help lower the learning curve of games, and offer entirely new experiences. For example, I had a chat a couple of weeks ago with a game designer who was working on an automated web-based system for managing a Martian colony. It could be played as a solo game or be used as a game tool for a role-playing game. I'm all for new creative ideas like that and new ways to play. As much as we like to blame social media for all society's wrongs, I believe that social media has played a crucial role in unifying the indie market and helping smaller creators advertise projects that would have otherwise been left unseen. There are many talented creators who help evolve the genres by blending adjacent styles and coming up with unique hybrid games that then give rise to entirely new ways of play. Ironically, for a hobby defined by solitary play, solo RPGs foster a surprising amount of community engagement. Shared experiences, playthroughs, and support for creators make it feel collaborative, even if you're the only one rolling the dice or drawing the cards. And with how quickly the space is growing and evolving, I believe we're only seeing the beginning of what solo RPGs can become. As we have seen throughout this video, solo RPGs are no longer a niche side branch of the tabletop hobby. They have become a distinct and thriving genre in their own right. Much of the innovation happened during the pandemic, so the question now is whether things have fallen off since then, or if innovation is still moving forward. There will always be creators passionate about the niche spaces. Today, indie game designers are experimenting with hybrid mechanics, new ideas, generative tools, and genre mashups. The tools and formats we're using are also evolving thanks to crowdfunding, from signs and booklets to browser games, mobile apps, and box sets. One thing that seems likely to grow is the integration of digital tools, especially generative tools. Oracles and GM emulators will probably combine with AI for more advanced procedural generation. Despite controversies related to generative AI, these tools combined could, hopefully, lead to more accessible role-playing experiences, especially for those who would otherwise be unable to engage with traditional social tabletop RPGs. More accessibility efforts would help the tabletop RPG hobby reach an even wider audience, which I think would be a good thing. I don't think solo RPGs will see mainstream recognition anytime soon, but it is a good sign that more big publishers are incorporating solo rules in games that otherwise wouldn't have them. The new edition of the Alien RPG is such an example, where the original game didn't have solo rules, and the new edition does. In the end, the future of solo RPGs will likely be defined by the same forces that have always shaped it: individual creativity, community support, and the desire for solo entertainment. But that's the end of this video. What are your experiences with solo RPGs, and where do you think they will go in the future? Let me know in the comments. Until next time.